proceed through three particular phases of our time together. Maybe move into a fourth one, depending on what time we've got. In the first phase, I would like to talk a little bit about what is spirituality. I like to think, and I will have that diagram there, I like to think that in my understanding, what I'm going to say about spirituality, and it is a way to think of spirituality, I'm not presenting it as the way. I'd like to think it embodies something quite specifically Marist. I will then say a few words about the gospel that's focusing our time together, and then present a paper on obedience. And I've chosen obedience because I think it is certainly dear to Father John Paul Whelan, our founder, but I think it is a much needed practical virtue for us today, and it is also a much misunderstood virtue. So I hope to present it in a way that will challenge you and excite you and give you something to go away with and munch on. You all have a copy of the staple sheets headed Religion and Spirituality, Journey into Life. Now, I'd like to present this with some interaction, if I may. Well, first of all, to say some of the key ideas that I've attempted to embody in that diagram. First of all, the title is significant, Journey into Life. One of the lessons that I have certainly learned in the last 50 years or so, in a time which I think history will reveal as the time of the most rapid and the most profound change in the history of the human family, is the importance of process, the importance of being able to work with, to enter into an engagement and relatedness, rather than simply walk into the world with a finished plan and say, this is what has to be. So it's a journey, and it's into life. I've done this diagram, and let me apologise, it's a bit clunky. I'm no IT expert, and I'm no graphic artist, but try to read it from the middle out. And in the middle, I've got the words, the ongoing conversation of daily living. To say a couple of words about conversation, because I think the Marist way lends itself, in fact, leads into almost necessarily a way of being in the world that is conversational rather than dictatorial. We need to foster a culture in our societies that moves beyond a culture of telling. We Catholics, I think, have grown used to that, sadly, over generations, to a culture of conversation. The word conversation shares an etymology with the word conversion, and I don't think that's an accident. I would say the one thing that is absolutely necessary for a genuine conversation to take place is for at least one of the parties to enter that conversation with an openness to, if not an eagerness for, conversion. If neither party is open to conversion, no conversation will take place. You may have chatter, you may have debate or argument or discussion, you may have conflict. There'll be no conversation in the sense in which I'm speaking. The heart of conversation is an encounter with an other in which I change, in which my journey into life is enhanced and enabled. That can literally happen in any encounter. Even an argument can in fact also be a conversation for which one of the parties, if it is transformed. If I go away from it saying, I swore I'd never let this happen again. I must learn from it. In that sense, I've had a conversation, even if it presented as an argument. In essence, is conversion. Now, of course, for good conversation to take place, you need respect, you need listening, you need the ability to take the other seriously, you need patience, etc., etc. Practical things. But I would encourage you to think of the heart of conversation as conversion, or to use the gospel word, metanoia. the whole of life ought to be focused on that. Interestingly, in the Benedictine tradition, one of the vows is the conversatio morum. Now, there's a play on words here. Conversatio in Latin doesn't mean conversation in the English sense of the word, but conversatio morum means the conversion of life, the ongoing metanoia that I commit myself to. I'm going to suggest to you that that conversation is fourfold. With God, however you name God, with yourself, with other human beings, and with creation. Back to our diagram here. This ongoing conversion of life happens through what I think is at the core of our humanity. We are relational beings. To be is to be in relationship. To be me is to be with you. The birth of the modern individual, which goes back roughly to Descartes, I think, philosophically, is the birth of an isolated individual, a non-relational being, and it permeates our culture. And I don't think it's representative, I don't think it speaks of the reality. Human beings thrive in good relationships. Human beings desire good relationships. Human beings do not flourish when relationships are bad. Think about it. Good relationships are manifested in love, in patience, in kindness, in compassion, in forgiveness, etc. Who among us would say, I don't need any of that? I can thrive in hatred, in alienation, in no forgiveness, in broken relationships. It's absurd to even suggest it. It goes against our nature. Be is to be with. That adds a dimension to the process of conversion. Change actually is a movement to discover